There comes a moment in every life when you realize the problem isn't lack of time, lack of talent, or lack of opportunity. It's that you've been running on the same tired patterns, the same recycled emotions, the same low energy habits that keep pulling you back to where you started. You wake up already exhausted, not because life is hard, but because your mind is carrying yesterday into today. But hear this clearly, energy is not something you wait for, it's something you generate. Right now, in this very second, you have the power to break the loop, to flip the switch, to step into a level of intensity and focus you've never allowed yourself before. This isn't about motivation that fades by tomorrow morning. This is about unlocking the force inside you that's been buried under comfort, fear, and routine. Today is the day you stop living on autopilot and start living on purpose. The old patterns end here. The real power begins now. Most people believe energy is something that shows up when conditions are perfect, when they've had enough sleep, when life slows down, or when motivation magically appears. That belief alone is what keeps them stuck. Energy is not a gift handed to you by circumstances, it is a choice you make in the moment. You don't wake up energized, you have decided to generate energy by the way you move, the way you breathe, the way you focus, and the meaning you give to what's happening in your life. The moment you stop waiting for energy and start creating it, everything changes. Look at the times in your life when you felt unstoppable. Chances are nothing externally was perfect. What was different was your state. Your body was alive, your posture was strong, your breathing was full, and your mind was locked onto something that mattered deeply to you. That's not coincidence. That's conditioning. Your nervous system responds instantly to movement and focus. When you sit still, breathe shallow, and replay problems in your head, your body shuts down. But when you move with intention, breathe deeply, and lock your focus on a compelling reason, your energy rises fast. This is not philosophy, it's physiology. Energy follows meaning. If you attach boredom, obligation, or fear to what you're doing, your body resists. If you attach purpose, challenge, or growth, your body responds with power. That's why two people can do the same task and experience completely different levels of energy. One sees it as a burden, the other sees it as a mission. Your brain will always mobilize energy when it believes something is important for survival, growth, or contribution. When you consciously choose meaning, you command your energy instead of hoping for it. Most people let their environment control their energy. They wake up, check their phone, absorb stress, compare themselves to others, and drain themselves before the day even starts. High performers do the opposite. They prime their state first. They move their body, they control their breathing. They focus their mind on what they want, not on what they fear. They understand that energy is a muscle. The more you use it intentionally, the stronger it becomes. The truth is you can change your energy in seconds. Stand up, straighten your spine, breathe deeply and rhythmically. Focus on a goal that excites you or a reason bigger than yourself. Your body will respond immediately. The story that you're tired, unmotivated, or burned out is just that, a story. And stories can be rewritten in an instant when you decide to take control. When you stop asking, why am I so tired? And start asking, how do I want to feel right now? You shift from victim to creator. Energy is not something you chase, it's something you command. The moment you make that decision, you stop living at the mercy of circumstances and start living from your power. Most people believe their habits, reactions, and limitations define who they are. They say things like, this is just how I am, or I've always been this way, without realizing they are confusing conditioning with identity. What you repeat daily is not your nature, it is your training. Every emotional response, every procrastination pattern, every fear-based reaction was learned through repetition, environment, and experience. And anything that was learned can be changed. The moment you understand this, you reclaim control over your life. Your brain is designed to create patterns because patterns save energy. It doesn't care whether a pattern empowers you or limits you. It only cares that it's familiar. So if you've repeated stress, self-doubt, avoidance, or comfort seeking long enough, your nervous system starts treating those behaviors as normal. That's why breaking old patterns feels uncomfortable. It's not because you're weak, it's because your brain is trying to protect what it knows. Familiar pain often feels safer than unfamiliar growth. The problem is not the pattern itself, it's the meaning you attach to it. When a behavior becomes part of your identity, change feels like losing yourself. But here's the truth, you are not your emotions, you are not your habits. And you are not your past reactions. You are the one who practiced them. The instant you separate who you are from what you've been doing, change becomes possible. Identity is flexible when you choose it consciously instead of inheriting it unconsciously. Every pattern was created by a trigger, followed by a response, and then reinforced by a reward, even if that reward was temporary relief. Avoidance reduces anxiety. Anger creates a sense of control. Procrastination protects you from fear of failure. These patterns once served you, but they now cost you energy, confidence, and progress. Respect the pattern for what it tried to do, then decide it no longer gets to run your life. Breaking a pattern doesn't happen by willpower alone. It happens by interrupting the sequence. When you catch the trigger and respond differently, even once, you weaken the old wiring. When you repeat that new response with intensity and emotion, you build a new pattern faster than you think. The brain doesn't change through logic, it changes through experience. That's why small intellectual decisions fail, but emotionally charged decisions stick. The key is to create leverage. You must associate enough pain with staying the same and enough pleasure with changing. When the pain of holding on to the old pattern outweighs the comfort it provides, change becomes inevitable. This is not about becoming someone new, it's about returning to who you were before fear, conditioning, and repetition shaped your behavior. You are not broken, you are trained, and training can be upgraded. The moment you stop identifying with your old patterns and start identifying with your highest standards, you stop repeating the past and start creating a future that matches your true potential. Every action you take, every decision you avoid, every habit you repeat is being driven by one of two forces: the desire to move away from pain or the desire to move towards something meaningful. There is no neutral behavior. Even when you do nothing, you are still choosing, and that choice is usually driven by pain you're trying to avoid. Most people don't consciously design their lives. They react to discomfort. They procrastinate to avoid failure, stay silent to avoid rejection, and settle for less to avoid uncertainty. Pain becomes the invisible driver behind their choices. Pain is not the enemy. In fact, pain is one of the greatest motivators on the planet. The problem is when it operates unconsciously. When pain is in control, it keeps you playing small. It pushes you to seek short-term relief instead of long-term fulfillment. You eat, scroll, distract, or delay not because you're lazy, but because your nervous system is trying to escape discomfort. The relief feels good for a moment, but it slowly drains your confidence and energy. Over time, that avoidance becomes a lifestyle. Purpose works differently. Purpose doesn't eliminate pain. It gives pain meaning. When you have a clear reason that's bigger than your fear, you'll do things that once felt impossible. You'll wake up early, push through fatigue, and stay committed even when motivation fades. Purpose turns struggle into fuel. It transforms pressure into power. The human spirit can endure almost anything when it knows why it's doing it. The danger is not pain itself, but living without a conscious purpose. When you don't choose what you're moving toward, pain will choose what you're running from. You'll spend your life reacting instead of creating. That's why so many people feel busy but unfulfilled. They're constantly moving, but they're not moving in a direction that inspires them. Motion without meaning leads to exhaustion. The moment you define a purpose that excites you, your behavior changes automatically. You don't need constant motivation because your reason becomes your drive. Your mind starts filtering opportunities differently. Your energy increases because your actions are aligned with something that matters. Purpose organizes your priorities and eliminates hesitation. It gives you a standard to live up to instead of a fear to hide from. Here's the truth most people avoid: if your life isn't changing, it's because the pain of staying the same hasn't outweighed the pain of change, and the purpose pulling you forward isn't strong enough yet. When both shift, transformation becomes unavoidable. You stop negotiating with yourself, you stop waiting, you move. You get to choose what drives you. You can let unconscious pain run your days, or you can consciously design a purpose that pulls you into action. One leads to survival, the other leads to fulfillment. The moment you make that choice, your energy, focus, and direction begin to align, and that's when real momentum starts. Most people try to change their lives by thinking their way into better behavior, but lasting change doesn't start in the mind, it starts in the state. Your emotional and physical state determines what you focus on, how you interpret events, and what actions you take. When you're tired, frustrated, or overwhelmed, even small problems feel impossible. When you're energized, focused and certain, the same problems look like challenges you're ready to conquer. Life doesn't change first, your state does. And when your state changes, everything else follows. A state is created by three things: how you use your body, what you focus on, and the meaning you give to what's happening. Change any one of these and your state shifts instantly. Most people ignore this truth. They sit still, breathe shallow, slump their shoulders, and replay negative stories in their minds. Then they wonder why they feel stuck. Their body is signaling weakness. Their focus is locked on problems, and their meaning is filled with doubt. That combination guarantees the same results day after day. The fastest way to break an old pattern is to interrupt the state that feeds it. Patterns cannot survive without the emotional fuel that created them. Depression, fear, procrastination, and self-doubt all require a specific posture, breathing pattern, and internal dialogue to exist. Change the physiology and the pattern weakens immediately. That's why movement is so powerful. When you move with intensity, breathe deeply, and change your physical presence, your nervous system receives a new message: something is different now. Focus is just as critical. Whatever you consistently focus on, you feel. If you focus on what you lack, you feel empty. If you focus on what you can control, you feel empowered. The mind doesn't distinguish between real and imagined experiences. It responds to what you hold in focus. When you deliberately shift your attention to solutions, goals, or gratitude, your emotional state follows. This is not pretending. It's directing your mind instead of letting it wander. Meaning completes the transformation. Two people can experience the same event and walk away with completely different emotional states based on the meaning they assign. One sees failure as proof they're not enough. The other sees it as feedback for growth. Meaning determines whether an experience weakens you or strengthens you. When you decide that challenges are shaping you instead of stopping you, your energy rises and your resilience expands. State change is not about positive thinking, it's about conscious control. You don't wait to feel confident before you act. You act in a way that creates confidence. You don't wait to feel strong, you move like someone who is strong. When you repeatedly shift your state on command, you train your nervous system to respond powerfully under pressure. Life change doesn't happen someday. It happens in moments. The moment you stand taller, breathe deeper, focus differently, and choose a meaning that empowers you. Change your state, and you change the direction of your life faster than you ever thought possible. Your life will never rise above the standards you set for yourself. Not your goals, not your wishes, not your intentions, your standards. Standards are the rules you live by, the behaviors you accept, and the limits you refuse to tolerate. Most people don't consciously choose their standards, they drift into them. They slowly accept less energy, less focus, less discipline, and less belief until average feels normal. What you tolerate becomes your lifestyle, and over time, it becomes your identity. A standard is not what you say you want, it's what you consistently do. You may want confidence, success, and freedom, but if you tolerate procrastination, excuses, and inconsistency, those become your real standards. The difference between people who transform their lives and those who stay stuck is not talent or luck. It's what they refuse to accept anymore. The moment you say, "This stops now," and mean it emotionally, your behavior changes. Raising your standards requires leverage. You must associate pain with staying where you are and pleasure with becoming who you decide to be. Change doesn't come from wishing, it comes from deciding. When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, your standards upgrade instantly. That's why people often change fastest after a breaking point, but you don't need to wait for life to force you. You can create that leverage consciously. High standards demand alignment. When you raise the bar, your habits must rise with it. You stop negotiating with your weaknesses. You don't ask how you feel, you act based on who you've decided to be. Discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like self-respect. You no longer rely on motivation because your standards don't change based on mood. Standards also shape your environment. When you demand more from yourself, you naturally demand more from the people and situations around you. You protect your time, your energy, and your focus. You walk away from what drains you and move toward what strengthens you. This is not arrogance, it's clarity. You cannot build an extraordinary life while tolerating ordinary habits. The most powerful shift happens when your standards become non-negotiable. You don't try to be consistent, you are consistent. You don't attempt to be focused, you eliminate distractions. You don't hope to grow, you commit to growth daily. Identity follows standards, not the other way around. Act like someone with high standards long enough, and that becomes who you are. Your destiny is not decided by one big moment, but by the standards you live by every day. Raise them, and your energy increases. Raise them, and your actions sharpen. Raise them, and your future expands. The moment you decide what you will no longer tolerate is the moment your life begins to change, and it never goes back to the same level again. Everything you've heard comes down to one simple truth: your life changes the moment you decide to take control of it. Not someday. Not when conditions improve. Not when motivation magically appears. Right now, energy is something you create. Patterns are something you interrupt. Pain or purpose is something you choose, and your standards are something you command. None of this requires permission. None of this requires perfection. It only requires a decision backed by action. You already have more power than you've been using. The reason it hasn't shown up yet is because comfort has been louder than commitment, and habit has been stronger than intention. But that can change in an instant. One decision made with emotional intensity can rewrite years of repetition. The past does not define you unless you keep reliving it. The moment you choose differently, you step into a new future. This is not about becoming someone else. It's about shedding what no longer serves you and stepping into the version of yourself that's been waiting for you to lead. When you change your state, redirect your focus, give pain a purpose, and raise your standards, momentum becomes inevitable. You stop forcing life to work. Life starts responding to who you've decided to be. The question is no longer whether change is possible. The question is whether you will act on what you know. Because knowing without action keeps you exactly where you are. Decide today that the old patterns end here. Decide that your energy, your time, and your potential are non-negotiable. When you do, you won't just feel different, you'll live different. And once that shift happens, there is no going back.